Hi guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about pleats, how to make pleats, how much fabric do you need to make the pleats you want to make, what kinds of pleats do we have. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. If that's something that you're interested in, definitely keep watching. Also, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And for those of you who don't know, we now have a Patreon page and we now have a newsletter. So if you would like to sign up for the newsletter, check out the links that I have in the description bar below, as well as the link for the Patreon page. Alright guys, so for today's video, I'm going to be using some pins and my magnet. I'm also going to be using the highlighting pens I have here. I'm going to be using my tailor's chalk as well as my fabric scissors and paper scissors. I'm going to be using my measuring tape. I'm also going to be using my steel rule. I've got here fabric and zipper, and that's going to be for next week when we're making the pleated skirt. And I've also got here like some strips of paper. So just in case you are wondering, what are pleats? Pleats are folds formed by doubling fabric back upon itself and securing them in place. Some common types of pleats are knife pleats, accordion pleats, box pleats, inverted pleats. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the inverted pleats as well as knife pleats. However, you will need your waist circumference measurement and skirt length measurement. And also, I promise to share a trick with you guys. So the trick is this: to find the fabric needed for your pleats, you need your waist circumference measurement times 3, and then you want to add the zip allowance to that. So again, the waist circumference measurement value, you want to multiply that by 3, and then you want to go ahead and add the zipper allowance to that. Alright guys, so moving on to the illustration, I have my strip of paper and I'm starting off by measuring the zipper allowance of 1.5 inch at one point, and then from that point I'm going to go ahead and mark out the waist circumference times 3. So in this case, the waist circumference value I'm working with is 6 inches. 6 inches times 3 is 18 inches, and then after that 6 inches times 3, I'll go ahead and mark out the zipper allowance at the other edge. Like again, the formula is the waist circumference measurement times 3 plus the zipper allowance value. Cut off the excess fabric that you have. So in this case, we're assuming this is our fabric. I'm cutting off the excess paper and I'm now marking out my zipper allowance. So at the end of the day, we're going to be working with the spaces in between the zipper allowance. For knife pleats that are 1 inch wide, you want to go ahead and partition the parts to be pleated into 1 inch portions. So as you can see, I'm going ahead to mark 1 inch marks all the way, starting from the first zipper allowance mark to the second zipper allowance mark. After marking out 1 inch portions, you want to go ahead and label each point as 1, 2, and 3 consecutively. This is because the pleats fold back on itself. So as you can see, I've gone ahead to label it now, and the next thing is to start pleating. To know how to pleat, all you need to do is pinch point 1 and then fold it over to point 3 as shown. So again, what you want to do is you want to pinch point 1 and then you want to fold it over so that it touches point 3, and you want to hold it in place with a pin. So go ahead and repeat this until you're done pleating the entire portion. After pleating the entire portion, you want to go ahead and confirm the measurement that you have. And the measurement that you have in between the zipper allowance should be the waist circumference measurement that you had earlier. So in this case, I had a waist circumference measurement of 6 inches. And after checking, it is 6 inches, which means that this was done correctly. So moving on again, you want to go ahead and get another strip of fabric. And to require the fabric required, or to know the fabric required rather, you want to go ahead and get the waist circumference measurement times 3, and then you want to add the zipper allowance. In this case, I'm using a zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. So I've gone ahead to mark 1.5 inches at the start. I'm ruling a line there. And then from there, I've gone ahead to mark 18 inches, which is my waist circumference measurement times 3. I'm ruling another line. And then I went ahead to mark the last zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. So now I have my zipper allowance on both sides. And the next thing to do is to mark out my knife pleats. In this case, my pleats are going to be 1.5 inches wide. So I've gone ahead to partition the pleated portion into 1.5 inches. And then afterwards, you want to go ahead and repeat the process of labeling them as 1, 2, and 3. So guys, I just wanted to quickly chip in that sometimes the last part you have might not exactly be 1.5 inches. It might be slightly less or slightly more, but you don't want it like, obviously more. You want it to be just slightly less or slightly more, and that's absolutely fine. It really doesn't matter. So after labeling your point as 1, 2, 3, you want to repeat the process of pinching point 1 and folding it over to point 3 as shown. You want to repeat that all through. Now, because the pleats in this case are bigger or wider, of course you will have less pleats than if they were smaller. After pleating, go ahead and confirm the measurement. Again, you should have the waist circumference measurement in between the zip allowance. So that means if you're taking, the measurement from one zip allowance point to the second, you should have 6 inches in this case. Next, I'll be showing you how to make inverted pleats. Inverted pleats are formed by 2 knife pleats facing each other. Sometimes they're called the kissing pleats. So basically, you want to go ahead and mark out the fabric that you require using the formula that I showed earlier. The formula is the waist circumference measurement multiplied by 3, and then you want to go ahead and mark your zipper allowance on both ends. So in this case, the waist circumference I'm using is 7 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out my zipper allowance of 1.5 inches first, and then 21 inches afterwards for the pleating portion, and then 1.5 inches again. After doing that, I'm going to connect the points on the zipper allowance at the beginning and the zipper allowance at the end and cut off any excess fabric that I have. So in this case, as you can see, the excess paper is so small. I've gone ahead to cut it off, and then I have marked my zipper allowance on both sides, one on the left and one on the right. So again, in this case, we're working with a waist circumference that is 7 inches, which is slightly bigger than what we've been doing. The next thing I like to do when I'm working with inverted pleats is I like to determine how wide I want my pleats. So as you can see, I'm just doing like one pleat on a random piece of paper, and I've marked it out where it stopped. So I'm going to go ahead and measure the total length that I have here, and in this case I have 5 inches. However, I think that is too big for the piece of paper that I'm working with. At this point, I have decided on a pleat width of 4.2 inches. So starting from one zip allowance point, go ahead and mark the desired pleat width, ensuring it's evenly distributed. So if you like and you want a pleat width of 3 inches, you can go ahead and mark 3 inches all through. If you want a pleat width of 5 inches, you can go ahead and mark your pleat width or your desired pleat width all through, making sure it's evenly distributed, guys. That's absolutely important. So you want to go ahead and calculate your maths properly and ensure that it's evenly distributed. After marking out the desired pleat width, which is how wide you want your pleat to be, I went ahead to start pleating without any calculations, but I found that it was a bit cumbersome. So what I advise that you do is that you divide each pleat width section into 3, and then you want to go ahead and label as 1, 2, and 3. So for instance, if you are using a pleat width of 4.5 inches, you want to go ahead and divide them into 1.5 inches each, and then you have 3 sections within a pleat width and label it as 1, 2, and 3. You want to do that all through so that you have 1, 2, and 3 consecutively. And now it gets a bit tricky. When it comes to inverted pleats, it starts off just like knife pleats. So you want to fold point 1 over to point 3 and then hold it in place with a pin. However, for the inverted or for the opposite knife pleat, what you want to do is you want to reach out to point 2, pinch point 2 over back to the first point 1, so that you have pleats that are facing each other or are just side by side next to each other or are kissing each other, depending on what term you'll use. So you want to go ahead and repeat that. So again, when it comes to inverted pleats, point 1 goes over to point 3 just like you would any knife pleat, And then for the other side, you have point 2 folding over back to point 1. After pleating, go ahead and confirm the measurement that you have in between the zip allowance. You should have your waist circumference measurement if you've done this correctly. And as you can see, guys, I have 7 inches, which kind of shows that I've done this correctly. Moving on, I'm going to show you one last time. However, this time I'm going to be using fabric. Again, using the formula, I'm going to cut out the fabric that I require, which is my waist circumference measurement multiplied by 3. And in this case, the waist circumference measurement I'm using is 12 inches. So 12 inches multiplied by 3 is 36 inches plus 1.5 inches on the left and another 1.5 inch zip allowance on the right. So I'm going to have a total of 39 inches for this fabric that I'll be requiring. Cut off all the excess fabric and then go ahead and mark out the zip allowance on the left and the zip allowance on the right. By the way, guys, when it comes to your zip allowance, you can use whatever zip allowance you want. So whether you want 1 inch or you want 1.5 inches is entirely up to you. Next, determine the pleat width that you would like. So depending on what size you want your pleats to be, that's what your pleat width will say. So I'm using a pleat width of 5 inches and I'm going to go ahead and mark 5 inches starting from one zip allowance point all the way till I get to the very end. Alright guys, I just wanted to quickly call your attention to this. If you recall, I'm using a waist circumference of 12 inches and 12 inches times 3 is 36 inches. And then I'm going ahead with pleat width of 5 inches, which is basically going to be 35 at the most. So I have like 1 inch space, which is not a lot, but it's actually a lot. So there are 2 ways. In this first method, I'm just going to leave the 1 inch at the end and you'll see how I do it. I'm going to make the last pleat slightly wider. Divide each pleat width into 3 sections as shown. Then go ahead and label as 1, 2, and 3 consecutively. You want to go ahead and do that for each pleat section and make sure you label appropriately. Alright guys, so for this one, the last pleat width is going to be 1 inch wider. So while the rest are 5 inches, this one will be about 6 inches, which is absolutely fine because it's a negligible difference. However, if you like to make it exactly or evenly distributed, there's another approach to that and I will just share that in a second. To start forming the inverted pleats, go ahead and fold point 1 over to point 3. And then you want to fold point 2 over back to the point 1 at the start, just like I'm doing right now. Hold your pleats into place so that they're facing each other and they're kissing. And this is what it should look like. So again, point 1 goes over to point 3 and then you get point 2 and fold it back to point 1. Just like I'm showing you guys right now. And this is what it should look like. Your pleats should be evenly distributed at the back. They should not be overlapping. They should only be touching each other basically. Go ahead and continue the pleating process and hold it in place with pins securely. After pleating, confirm that the waist circumference measurement that you have is correct. And like I said, you should have 12 inches, which means that it was well done. Alright guys, in a case where you have the excess, just like I was showing you earlier, what you can do is when you know that your pleat width. If you're, for instance, if you're working with a space that is 36 inches and you want your pleats to be 5 inches, you know that 5 inches times 7, which is the maximum number of pleats you can get, is just 35, leaving you with 1 inch allowance. What you can do is you can share the 1 inch on both sides so that it's equal. So that means you start from the zip allowance, you mark half an inch on one side before you start to mark the pleat width, and then when you get to the end, you have another half an inch. So again, another example randomly is if you have pleat width of 7 inches and then you have a space of 37 inches. The best you can get is you can get 5 pleats that are 7 inches, which would be 35, leaving you with an excess of 2 inches. So that's 37 minus 35, which is 2 inches. With the excess of 2 inches, what you can do is you can split it both ways. So you can do, after the zip allowance, you can do 1 inch to the left, and then on the other side, after the zip, or before the zip allowance rather, you have another 1 inch, so that you have your 7-inch pleats in between, just like the diagram being shown on the screen at the moment. Going with the explanation that I have just given, I'm going to go ahead and redo this one. So guys, remember that we have 12 inches for the waist circumference. So 12 times 3 is 36 inches. That means the space that we're working with in this case is 36 inches. And then you remember that we're doing a pleat width of 5 inches. So we can get about 7 pleats, 7 of those pleats, and then still have 1 inch excess. What I've gone to do with my 1 inch excess is I have put half an inch at the beginning. So I marked out my zip allowance and then half an inch. Then I started marking out my pleat width until I got to the end, where I have another half an inch before my zip allowance. So guys, at this point we are now done, and you now know how to do your inverted pleats as well as your knife pleats. I don't know if you understand, but I hope you do. I feel like this tutorial might have been a lot, but let me know in the comment section if you understand everything that I've explained and if this tutorial makes sense. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it was worth your while. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, and also don't forget to be a patron. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week when we're making the pleated skirt. Alright guys, stay safe. Bye.